Something on the screen.
Yeah.
We're live from Capital Factory in Austin, Texas.
It's Amanda. Not nearly as funny as Saturday Night Live, but I'll try. So I mentioned this before. My name is Amanda. I work for a company called Hired. Show of hands, has anyone heard of us? Just yeah. Okay. We stalk you on the internet. So Hired is a marketplace to help technical talent find jobs. It's basically like designed to make the job search process way more efficient, way more streamlined and transparent, because looking for a job sometimes really sucks, and looking for really great talent is sometimes like finding a needle in a haystack. And so we're trying to make both of those sides of the marketplace a lot easier. So being a, I was a talent advocate at Hired, and I moved into a new role, but basically a talent advocate is exactly that. Whenever a candidate signs up for the Hired platform, they get someone in their corner to kind of like guide them on interview best practices, educate them about like salary and compensation in the given markets that they're looking at. Since we're a national and global company, we have insight into different markets and what those salary bands are. Like we all know that Austin salaries are very different from San Francisco, and Austin versus Atlanta is different as well, and even Austin and Dallas varies a bit too. So that's what your talent advocate is there for, is to kind of be a coach or someone in your corner to, bounce ideas off of someone that's knowledgeable about the whole job search process and what's going out there in the market. So now I am a client executive, and basically I work with all the employers that use the platform. My goal is to have like all the best employers in Austin and Dallas and Houston using Hired. So hopefully that happens. So before I joined Hired, I was at Maker Square, which is how I met some of these lovely ladies in the room today. That was a really great experience. Maker Square is a great boot camp. There's tons of great boot camps out there that have like really, really awesome curriculum and great alumni networks. So if you're curious about boot camps, like definitely find alumni or past employees that have worked there. They'll give you the skinny on that. And then before that, I worked at the Acton School of Business, which is an MBA program here in Austin. And a lot of the graduates from that entrepreneurship program were going into tech. And so that's how I got my start, really. So these are like logos of companies that, typically you wouldn't really think of them as like a tech company, or at least I necessarily wouldn't. Like I think like Spotify's like music, and that's how I discovered like really awesome music. And BuzzFeed is just a dark hole where I spend like 5 hours of my day and wanted all that. Google is my life. Don't know how I would live without it. And YouTube is where I go when I've had a bad day. Sephora is an interesting one. Oddly enough, like Sephora has like some pretty interesting like back end that connects like users with all the products that they've bought. So I spend a lot of time and like most of my paycheck at Sephora. And so it's really nice that whenever I'm running out of my lipstick that I shouldn't buy, they remind me, and that's so nice, that I should like go pay $50. So yeah, like these are just examples of like companies that you necessarily wouldn't think of that are associated with tech, but they really are like very like tech heavy, and have like really great engineering and data science teams like running all the shit behind it, running all the stuff behind the scenes. So basically there's different ways that you interact with tech, and most of you probably know this, but on your phone, on your tablet, Android, iOS, and Windows applications, I can't really think of a day where I don't use a mobile app, like ever. I don't know how I would get, like traveling even, like how am I gonna get my Uber to my hotel, like that kind of thing. That didn't really exist until a couple years ago. And then there's like websites and web apps. I think pretty much everything on the internet now is a web app. Websites are pretty just like static. I can't really think of, no, I was gonna say WinFlow, but no, yeah, it is. It connects to OpenTable, which then I can like reserve a spot. So those are the two differences in like the ways that you would typically interact with the internets. So how does all this stuff get built? It's actually a really cool industry. There's lots of collaboration, and as you've heard from like the women here that are already in tech, lots of people have like various different backgrounds, which really comes into play now that our lives are so interconnected, and that these companies are trying to figure out the best way that we use tech in our daily lives. So these teams are really fascinating to me, and I only like highlighted like the top, like the most common like job functions that you would have or that you would see, but there's a lot more. So basically, like this is like the dream team, I guess, of designers, front-end devs, and back-end devs. And so designers usually are in charge of, this is actually a very cool job function. Designers are like come from like really interesting backgrounds. They usually have obviously like some kind of design or art experience, but there's also a larger segment that like come from like psychology backgrounds and that are like analyzing user patterns and kind of bringing all that into play to kind of design the best experience that you can have when you're interacting with a mobile application or a web application, to like make it easier for you to use and make it way more intuitive. The front end dev actually like makes sure that everything that you're clicking through is working exactly the same way, so everything that you're seeing is working. And then the back end dev, that's all the data that's being called and stored and really kind of like the root of everything. So then diving a little bit deeper into this, like the design function, there's UI designers, UX designers, UX researchers, which I think is really cool, visual designers, graphic designers, and then there's like product people that are in charge of overseeing the life cycle of an entire product and what happens and how do we, when do we add this into a new feature, and kind of gathering user feedback, like what should we do with, like at Hired, for instance, we were having a lot of feedback from employers and candidates saying like, hey, I really want to schedule an interview, but I can't through your app. And so we were like, our product team was like, yay, let's build in a calendar functionality. And then product design and then the engineering team all work together to kind of like make that happen. And then I think a really interesting like new set is like data science, which is really fascinating because there's lots and lots of data being collected about us, but also I think data is like really powerful and has a huge impact to like make our lives happier. So my favorite example of this is the Spotify algorithm always finds me really great music, and it's because they've listened to all the things that I'm liking and like are tracking all of that, and probably have like a very accurate profile of where I shop and what I eat, all that stuff. So that's it. That's my talk. Does anyone have a question? Sorry. Yeah.
I was just talking to a programmer once upon a time, and I didn't successfully complete my engineering degree, but like that's kind of like my mind frame, just very PC, and so he was trying to point me in data science direction.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the companies, all companies obviously are going to start using data science if they're not already.
Yeah, I would say like consumer products, there's lots of I guess companies on the B2B side that are using analytics to make those transactions between like B2B customers and clients a lot more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
I think like whoever gave you that recommendation, that's great, but it seems like you're pretty early on in your exploration of everything. So my advice to you is like, don't get married to something, but explore. And then I always tell this to everyone, I do this myself, like stick to your strengths and like what you enjoy doing, what you can like go down a rabbit hole for like a couple of hours and like get excited about. Mm-hmm. And if that's data science or if it's
data science, that's less programming and more analysis, I'd assume, right?
No, there's a good amount of programming in it as well. Yeah, It just depends on what, and even within that, there's different things. Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, explore and kind of figure out. Maybe do some informational interviews with, maybe ask. Does anyone know a data scientist here? Okay.
Yeah, there is a bunch of coding.
Okay.
But yeah, like figure out if it's something that you want to devote the time and effort into.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Well, and for somebody that's brand new, what do you suggest that they do? Like my daughter will be coming out with a couple of years of minor classes in computer science. What is a good avenue for her to take?
Yeah, I definitely think that building a portfolio of like small projects that you've created by yourself or with a friend, it doesn't need to be like something amazing, honestly, just something that shows your proficiency. It could be as easy as like, oh man, what did one of my candidates? Oh, I had a candidate that I was working with. She just replicated like a movie aggregator that was like showing like her tastes and what she enjoyed, and she just kind of built that from scratch on her own. But yeah, I recommend like small projects. Like nonprofits always need things built, so if you know there's a small feature or some like a version 1 or an MVP that you could build, definitely do that. They're always willing to.
And putting it on GitHub?
Yeah.
I also have,
GitHub. Employers like to see your code before they interview you. It just helps them have a better barometer of like where to start the interview process. Like maybe they don't need to send you a code challenge. They can just look at what you've done before, or maybe they decide that they should. But either way, it's just good to show that like one, you can learn on your own and that you're excited about this and it's not just a job. But two, it really does help them kind of gauge like where to start the interview process.
somebody also told me was another advice given about how to penetrate, I guess, the tech market when you're a beginner and you're competing with people who've been doing it for, you know, since they were 12, about doing front end coding and then, you know, maybe building a relationship with that company and then kind of working your way in that way.
Yeah, I mean, the engineers that I've worked with have kind of done pretty much everything over the course of their careers. That's the really cool thing about tech and being a developer is that technologies change. Like technologies that are hot and that are in use, like you changed your app from like PHP to Rails, like that happens all the time. So there's definitely the opportunity to grow and change what you're doing. Like you definitely do not have to stay in the same role or in the same tech stack your entire career, and I really don't think that you should. I definitely think that you should always be learning and try new things and be on lookout for what's new and what's out there. That's the cool thing about this industry. Like you don't have to stay pigeonholed. I think that's the best thing about it. You can do whatever you want.
Also, if you can, go to meetups because you can meet coders there, and as you hear them talking about the stuff that they're doing, you might find that things will resonate with you. You might, that's really cool. I want to do that. I had studied front-end development in college and had done web design. And so when I went to Makersquare, I thought, oh, I'm going to be a front-end developer. Like, I have a background in graphic design. Of course I'm going to love the front end. But when I went into the program, I realized I really liked the coding and the logic and the back end. And it's been hard because when I've gone on interviews, companies will say, oh, you're from a boot camp, so you're a front-end developer. And I'll say, no, I'm a back-end developer. Trust me. Maybe I'm not as smart as you guys who've been doing it for 30 years, but I can traverse a binary tree. I had to, and I did. Took me a while, but I did. So, but they all started somewhere. Nobody was born coding like a genius. Maybe they started when they were 7, but it's not a competition. All of us are on our own journey, and you make it what you want it to be. So if you want to be a data scientist, go do that. If you want to be a back-end programmer, do that. But as Amanda said, try a bunch of different things. So, go to meetups, go to hackathons. Hackathons are a great place to go and build a portfolio because you have to in a weekend. They sound scary, but they're not that scary. We did one last year as a portfolio hackathon for beginners, and we'll do it again this fall. But there's other ones that are coming up. Just go on Meetup, follow some of the intro to tech in Austin and stuff, and they'll tell you about events that are coming up. There's Code Academy.
Oh yeah, these are some resources for the beginners. Code Academy, Code School, Team Treehouse, Khan Academy,
Yeah,
and Code.org.
anything that makes you build an app by the end of it, I would recommend doing, because then you have that in your code, and try and think of something that you would like to use. You know, maybe
Yeah.
you're like, I always wish I had a record of all my albums. You know, back in the day you might have wanted all your CDs, but you know, you can think of something that could be useful to you
Mhm.
and that you wish you had, and then you could build that.
All right.
To Holly's point about interviewing, interviews are scary for everyone. But the cool thing about technical interviews that doesn't really happen in other types of interviews is that you get the answers for the next interview, like essentially. So
Yes.
while it is super challenging and you're probably going to be in a room with lots of people asking you all these questions, I tell candidates to think of it as like a learning opportunity. Like, yes, you want to do well. You are going to fail in interviews. Like, it happens to everyone. But like, try not to let that impact your psyche negatively. Like, rephrase it as like, okay, I got this much of it right, and this is what I need to improve on for the next time. Like, in other job functions, that doesn't really happen. They're just like, not a good fit. But this one, like in technical interviews, like you'll know like where you need to improve.
Yeah.
And most of the time, employers are pretty nice in letting you know, like, you're too junior, or, you know, we really want someone with this type of experience specifically on this. And so I would use that to your advantage. So if you're new into this, or you're thinking about, you know, changing jobs, like, interview as much as possible, because it's more practice and it helps you ace the test better next time. So yeah, that's
And
just.
some really nice places tell you what to study for,
Mhm.
or if you work with a recruiter, they'll have sent other people there, so they'll know, oh, they're gonna ask you questions like this.
Yeah.
And if you can find someone who works there and ask them, you know, Austin's really not that big. Once you've been here a bit, you'll know people at different companies, and it'll be easier to find someone who knows someone there, and so you can say, you know, what's the interview like? Like, what kind of questions are they gonna ask? Is it gonna be front end? Is it gonna be back end? Is it Python? Is it Java?
Yeah.
And just breathe. And if you get stuck, ask for help, because as a beginner, they're not expecting you to know everything. But sadly, they will ask you the same questions that they ask experts. Because I was interviewing this guy, I'd been there 2 months. He's like, yeah, so this was the question they asked me. And I was thinking, you've been programming 20 years. So why are you asking me the question? But he was just curious to see how I would solve it.
Yeah.
And where I would get stuck. And if my solution would be different than his. And my solution was different. His was like slightly better than mine, but mine still worked. So
Yeah.
I was like, hey, I'm almost as smart as the guy who's been doing this for 20 years.
The other thing too is like, yes, they're looking for what you don't know, but more importantly, they're looking for what you do know and how you articulate that. And time again, like, the feedback that we get from employers is, can this person collaborate? Can they articulate when they're struggling? And can they work with someone to find like a common solution, to find a solution? So don't get choked up in your interviews. Just ask questions.
Yeah, I have a question, because whenever I send in my resume, every time I get, I don't even get to the interview process, because
Mhm.
they always see that there is no experience, tech experience kind of thing on my resume, and
Yeah.
I don't even get called. So how do you tackle this kind of thing? I mean, even if you show, like, I've done a certain amount of, learned something in coding, or learned something in QA, but there is no experience to show that you have worked in that area.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm not able to break in anywhere, because I've never gone to an interview process, though I have some QA courses, though I have a little bit of coding.
Yeah, so I think there's like three things. One, you might be applying to like the wrong type or size of company.
Mm-hmm.
I'll circle around back to that. And then the second thing, you might have to like restructure your resume to highlight projects versus like years of experience. So if you do have side projects or something in your GitHub that you can point to, like, I would showcase that, highlight tech stack, what you learned, challenges faced, versus like a chronological resume.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third thing, I can't remember the third thing, but I'll come back to it. It'll come. The first thing, like when I said like you might be targeting the wrong types of companies. So really big organizations that have like a team of recruiters have applicant tracking systems, and applicant tracking systems scan for like keywords and like certain criteria that their director of HR or whatever has input. And like, experienced engineers sometimes get kicked out of this too because it doesn't exactly match up. So as a beginner, like I definitely would not recommend that. I would focus your efforts on like small to medium sized companies that are willing to, one, probably need someone that's a little bit of jack of all trades. So you might have a job that's a little bit of everything, but that's cool because you get to learn. And then two, they're like willing to take a chance on someone and will probably actually have like a human reviewing your resume. And then the third thing still didn't come to me.
Internships.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
that's,
tried that, but I was not able to get that to the companies where I would not mind doing internships for a year or something, but I was not able to find something like that way.
yeah.
That's where going to meetups can help,
Mhm.
because if you meet people and you say like, I'm looking for an internship, most companies are willing to take you on as an intern, like a small to medium company.
Mm-hmm.
I know some fabulous people sitting over here who have taken on interns over the summer and worked with a lot of people, and there are other companies out there. You can also look on Craigslist, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes small companies will list on there. I know some people who got into tech because they just took jobs off of Craigslist. Someone said, I need an app, I need a website, and you're saying, I need experience. And so,
They just built it.
you know, you meet with them in a coffee shop in a public place to make sure they're not a weirdo. And if they're not, you know, charge like $30, $40 an hour and get an app out there. You know, you can do a class on Code Academy to learn Ruby on Rails on free, for free, and you can build a small app. And a lot of the people on Craigslist, they don't want a complicated app. You know, they want a more simpler app. And that's a way you can get in, and then you'll actually have experience you can put on your resume, and you can say, look, I built apps that do this, and I built apps that do that, and I was a contractor, and I made money doing it. And then companies will say, wow, you're very motivated, we want to hire you, you're a hard worker.
My advice is don't give up, because getting started, getting your feet wet, that's the hardest part to like gain traction, right? And finding a job, that first job in the
I know,
tech
that
industry,
first entrance, the first step
it's
is
gonna
where
be
we are
the
coming from.
hardest. Yeah, just don't give up. And then once you get it, it'll be easier from there.
Yeah. Thank you.
If you can afford it, go through a boot camp. That's the fastest way to get in, but not everyone can afford it. Some of them have scholarships, some of them have scholarships for women. You might ask about Dev Boot Camp. I think they have some scholarships. And if you can go through a program like that, they actually work with companies to get you hired afterwards. Okay. So it's another good resource.
Cool. That's all I got, folks.
Thank you, Amanda. All right, I'm next. I'm going to be talking about functional programming and Legos. Two things I like. So most of you have heard of object-oriented programming. That's what Java is, that's JavaScript, that's Ruby, that's Python. And not as many people know about functional programming. Functional programming is Scala and Haskell, and C actually is functional programming, but not C++. That's object. So why would you use functional programming and not object-oriented? Because in object-oriented programming, you have something that is an object, it's a class. Like you might have a user class, and the user has a first name and an email, and they get to log in. And so it's a good way of organizing your code in a way that you can understand. You have a user, and the user, like if you're on Facebook, has a wall, and they have posts, that they post to the wall, so the user can have many posts. And so that's how object-oriented people see the world. Functional programming comes a different way. Hey, we're famous. Functional programming is a different way. I'm not going to be doing the screen, so don't get distracted. I'm going to be using the whiteboard. Functional programming is a different way. It sees your code not as objects, not as things that kind of like mirror the world where there's users and they have stuff, like you have a jacket, a coat. They see code as little building blocks, like Legos, and they see it as reusable little pieces. So you want to take your code and break it down to the smallest part, and then you can reuse it again. So instead of having, you know, a user class, you could have a function that's just first name, and you would just pass a first name to it, and then you could use that function over and over and over for different things. So I'm going to show you how you can write some functional coding in JavaScript, because I think that explains it a lot better than, you know, pictures and words. I think actually writing it shows how you can use it better. So we're going to make a small program that just takes in a greeting like hello world, but instead we'll use people's names. So we'll write it. So I'm going to say var for variable greet equals, we're going to start our function. So I'm using what's called anonymous function. If any of you have done JavaScript or any kind of object-oriented, you know you usually have like function or def and then the name of your function. But you can do anonymous where you actually assign it to a variable. So I'm going to assign the function to greet, and then I can call greet in different places and even pass greet around. So my function is going to take in 2 arguments. It's going to take in greeting and name. And then if you've used Ruby or Python or C or anything, you're used to printing something for the user to see, but in JavaScript we log it to the console. So if we were to actually do this in a browser, you know, it would log to the console whatever we're passing in, and I want it to log the greeting, so it would actually print out and say, hello, somebody. We're going to put a comma and a space after the greeting, and then we'll pass the name. And then I can call this down here, and I can say greet, and then I want to put in the 2 things. So maybe I want to say hello to myself. I'm going to say hi, Holly. And so what that would do, let me move this. What that would do is, you know, it'd print out my name, and it would say, hi, Holly. Now, the way to do it in functional programming is to, instead of having this just print out, is to actually have it return another function. And that's where it can get confusing for people, is where you have a function returning a function, and then the second function will take the argument. And that's where you start to break things down into their smallest pieces. Because here we're taking 2 arguments. We're taking the greeting and the name. So if we actually wanted to break this down to its lowest form, if any of you have ever done, you know, algebra, and you have to reduce it down to the smallest part it can reduce to, you know, you simplify it. If we were to reduce this to its smallest form, we have 2 things going on here. We have a name and a greeting. Well, some of you, once you get into programming, you'll learn more about principles of programming and theories. And one of the things is like single responsibility. A function should only do one thing, because that keeps your code more maintainable. If you have a lot of stuff going on and you need to change one thing and it breaks everything else, that's a huge headache as a programmer. But if you have everything split into little pieces, it's a lot easier to change one thing, and you don't have as many things break. So if we're going to break this up into functions that we can reuse, we'll write it a little differently. So I'm going to call this curry, because that is a word that's used in functional programming. Curry just means that you have you know, a function, and then you can pass on like a second part to the function. So that's all currying is. It's two inputs. So where before we had greeting and name in one, set of parentheses, now you would say greeting and then name, because the first one's actually going to return a function that will take in the second argument. And it sounds confusing. It was very confusing to me the first time I did it, but it will make more sense as I write it out. So the first one is just going to take in the greeting, and then it's going to return a function. So we'll say return function. And this one will take in the name. And then we'll finally print out the console. So how would we call this now? Because we have this kind of nested thing going on. We have a function with another function nested inside of it, which you wouldn't hardly ever see in object-oriented programming. You'd never see a method with another method nested inside of it unless you were using an anonymous function like a lambda. So in JavaScript, we don't have lambda functions, but we have the ability to nest other functions. So to call this, we could just say, let's see, we're going to have another function called greet hello. And so greet hello is actually going to call greet curried. It's going to pass in just the argument hello. So this is where we're getting the building blocks, because I can use this function in another function. So here I'm making another function, and all it does is it calls greet curried, but it passes in an argument every single time, always the same thing. So if I always want to say hello, if you know you're going to have an app that does different greetings, and maybe you want to always say hello, if it's 9 a.m. and you want to say good night if it's 10 p.m. Then you could say, well, if it's 9 a.m., use my greet hello. And it would know that the first argument is always hello. And then if you wanted to have one that says, greet goodbye or whatever, you could say something else. You could say goodbye and say equal that, and then just passing goodbye. Well, then you could have this to use everywhere in your code, greet hello. And then you'd have the other one you could always use in your code. And so you start breaking things into little pieces. So down here I can say greet hello. And then I just pass the name. And it's going to return to me first this, whoops. It's going to return first this with the hello, but this is actually calling in that function with this, so this is actually getting passed here. And that's where sometimes the currying gets kind of confusing, because you think you have a function that only takes one argument, but your function actually already has a function inside with another argument. So when it gets compiled by the computer, first it sees this, passes it to there, then it sees that and passes it to there, and then it prints it all out. So I know it sounds really confusing. The first time I did it, I was like, what? Why would you ever want to do that? But it can help you maintain your code better if you're breaking things down to their smallest part and then just using them over and over and over. Any questions? Karen?
Can you chain those two then? Like, can you say like, greet, hello, and then, let's see. Like,
Yeah, I
greet,
could make another function that uses this and that and puts another piece onto it. I could say I want a function I can say I want a function that, let's see, has punctuation. And my function for punctuation is going to equal greet hello and then you would have to pass in a name, but let's just say we'll use a variable name, and then I also want to have this, you could turn this into a string, so you could say like parse string, and then plus that. And so every time I call it, I would turn this into a string and then add an exclamation on the end. So then if I were to call this, I would say, punctuation, and then passing your name. It would look something like this. I would need to turn this into a function, so that way I could call it like it's a function, because I'm calling it like it's a function with the parentheses. So I just don't have enough space, but yeah, you can chain things. And then you could even get to where, you're, if you're really doing currying, like this Greek curried, you could say like, I want, just always to greet Karen. And so then this would take 2 arguments, and the second one would be Karen. And then in here, for var punctuation, I could want to use the Greek Karen, but add an exclamation, happy to see Karen. And then it could always be Greek Karen with an exclamation point. So currying is just written out like this, because this is actually returning that function, and then that function is getting called here. So that's the only reason. It's just like a shorthand way of writing it, where you can have the 2 arguments right next to each other. Any other questions?
Yeah, where is the word curry? Because I've never heard of it.
You've never heard of the word curry?
No, I haven't.
It's in functional programming.
Never.
So if you ever look at Haskell or Scala, Clojure, that's where the word comes from, to curry.
And what does it mean? Is it
Curry favor, like.
Yeah, what is it, because I am, when you said it, I misheard you, but when you
Sure.
tell me what you're doing,
Well,
I've never heard the term.
So in Ruby, when you, I believe currying is also in C, but maybe it's not in C, but in Ruby, if you have a method, like we just had, greet. If you have a method that takes in, argument 1 and argument 2, this is called uncurried. Your arguments are together, in the list when they're passed in. They're actually usually passed in as an array, or you can pass them in as an array. So that's uncurried. But in functional programming, I think also currying is used in calculus. So currying is where you separate your arguments and they're passed in one at a time, because in lambda calculus, it can only take in 1 argument. So I don't know if anyone's studied calculus. I did not have calculus, but now I'm studying it. Did you take calculus? Yay, me. I didn't have calculus in school. I was like, I don't want to take that class. But now I'm learning it because I'm doing programming and I want to learn functional programming. So in lambda calculus, you'll have an argument that's passed into your program, and then something is returned like that. But if you have multiple arguments passed in, calculus only applies things one at a time. So when it actually gets reduced or simplified, it breaks them up. So this is called uncurried because everything's together. And currying is named after some mathematician. His name was, what was his name? I think his last name was Curry. Maybe his first name, Howard Curry. So it's named after him. He came up with this as a way of expressing math expressions. Haskell Curry. Yeah. I thought it was also related to Haskell, which is why it's Haskell. I was like, I think it's Haskell Curry, but that just sounds so weird. Yes, poor guy. So yeah, Haskell Curry came up with this way. It's just a way for your brain to understand what the math is doing. And so when you're using, lambda calculus, it actually is going to break it up and it's going to go like that, like that, like that. And then finally it's going to have, what's returned. These are the argument inputs and this is the output. And so now this is called currying. And really, it's like that. These are the arguments being passed in and then that's what's returned. So, uncurried form is where the arguments are all together. Curried is when they're separated because they're applied one at a time. So if we were to reduce this, we'd apply that, to here, and then we'd apply that to here, and that can't go any further because it's nowhere. So, that's curry, but it's Haskell Curry. Yes.
Can you reiterate why this is maybe better than object-oriented programming or a better use case?
So the thing is, again, if you're keeping your code into smaller pieces, it's easier to change. So with the original, function that I had here, Greek curry, if I wanted to change it and, I wanted, if I wanted all the names to print out in reverse, then I could put a dot reverse on here, and then all the functions that use this would get the names reversed. So instead of, if you had multiple classes that all had some kind of greeting, and they all had separate code, this would be a way of maintaining it because if everything's using the same code, it's really easy to change one little part, and then everything will be updated.
I guess the trade-off is actually typing more code.
Yeah. Yeah, is it just a different way of thinking?
Yeah.
You're not thinking in classes and objects anymore. You're thinking in more like collections, so these are going to be all the functions that are going to, work with calculations, and these are going to be all the functions that are going to work with strings or something. Like, you'd have a different way of organizing your code so that you can still find stuff, because as the programmer, you need to be able to find stuff and read your code base. So then it's not so much about like classes, it's more about how do we want to organize our folder structure, and how do we name things, and what do we want to name our functions so that they're understandable. But the other thing that's really nice about functional programming is they all check the types that you're using. So if you're using strings and if you're using floats and numbers and stuff, it can happen in dynamically typed like Ruby and Python, that errors can happen because you have a number, but you meant to type a string, but you won't catch that error because you don't compile your code before you run it. You have, your server up and it just runs, and you have to have like some kind of way of catching all your bugs to figure out where something was mistyped. Say you forgot a double quote at the end of your string, or you forgot, a semicolon, your code won't work. Some things are able to catch some of those errors, like if you restart your server on Ruby or Python, it will catch like, oh, you're missing, you're missing the end for your method. You need to have the end there, it won't run. But other things it may not catch, under the hood, with functional programming, you have to say, this is taking in a string, and this is taking in a number, which is similar to Java, but it gets even more intense than that. So it is a steep learning curve, because there is, like you said, a lot of typing and stuff, but the code tends to have very little bugs because everything was like caught right off the bat, and then it's more maintainable. I haven't used it in production, so I'm just repeating what other people said to me, and I'm like, are you sure? I'm still trying to wrap my head around it because it's kind of confusing, but I like it. I think it's interesting to break things down to like their smallest form. So code can get really sloppy. It's easy to keep adding methods and adding functions to a class because you're like, I don't know where this belongs. Let's just show it in there, and that's how code starts to get messy and harder to use and more of a headache. So the idea with functional programming is, everything is so strict, there's less room for you to mess up. Whereas in Ruby and Python and JavaScript, it's like free range, just run around and be happy, and as a beginner, that's what you want. You're like, yes, this is so much fun. But then you get to a place where you're like, man, I learned so much, but things kind of are wonky, and sometimes like I have a variable here, but then someone renamed it over here, and now it's changed, and this is killing me. It shouldn't change. Why did they assign another value? Like, this is supposed to be a string, but now it's coming back to me as a number, and so then you have to write tests to make sure it's always stays as a string, and everyone has to run the test so that they know never to change it to a number. It always has to be a string. Well, in functional programming, everything is immutable. You can only assign your variables once. They can never change. Yeah. So that's why you start learning to build things on pieces. Any other questions? I know this was a really intense talk. Anyone want to play with Legos? Dawn, did you want to give a pinch hit talk?
I can give a pinch hit.
A light, friendly talk?
Yeah, light and friendly. I'll allow people to decide for me what I can talk about. I could talk about, most importantly, I do believe that women, I want to see more women in tech. That's why I'm thrilled about my daughters. That's why I hire people like Holly and Nola and Stacy, and I truly believe in it. The only way that you're gonna get a good job is to know your stuff. And so it could be anything about understanding the world about software development, Agile and Waterfall, which could be a potential talk that I could give, is understanding what that means. It could be maybe the best way, finding a mentor, or maybe even tying that into how to get started. How can I learn? How do I go from zero to wherever? So I'll let you guys decide. Do you want to hear about Agile development versus old school waterfall and understand what that means if you don't already know? Or would you rather learn about my thoughts, or just not learn about, share my thoughts about how you can go from zero to wherever?
I would like from zero to whatever.
What about you?
I voted Agile.
Oh, Agile. All right, so let me see, a show of hands, Agile versus waterfall.
I don't know what any of that means.
It is a type
You should
of.
be raising your hand then.
Okay, 2 hands.
All right, so once again, how many? One. Oh, wow, okay. I have a feeling adds a waterfall went out. All right. Perhaps I'll do a talk in the future about how to get started.
Sure.
So I'll just talk about Agile versus waterfall. Back when I started, everything was waterfall, meaning when you developed a software, you came up with it, somebody came to you as a client and said, I want to do this. And Stacy has been with me long enough that she remembers these 10-page documents that we created that said, you know, a person said, I need, let me use this as an example, I need a software that will help me run my driving school. It needs to help kids sign up, and I need to make sure that they're over 16. And it needs to allow us to have drivers. And drivers need to have 3 people in the car, not more than that. And I only have 3 cars, so I need to make sure that I don't exceed 9 students in a given hour. And I need a 15-minute break and all this stuff. So they came to you with this idea, but you didn't even know that much. You just had, I need a driving school that helps me operate more effectively. So at the time, you know, way back when, and this is truly 14, 16 years ago, we had a page on our site, and I swear to God, it still exists.
It is, it's still there.
So if you go to thunderdata.com, that site has not been touched in years, but that was where we started. So that'll give you a glimpse into the past, actually. It's got a great archive of history. So in that site somewhere, there's a page about, you know, all these questions. And we found ourselves getting emails where people had printed it off, created a PDF, and sent it in to us and said, I answered all the questions. And it was more of a thing that we said, hey, think about this. If you're thinking of doing a software, come up, these are some things that you need to consider. Well, people took the time to fill it out, and then they became clients. Well, what I turned around and did is I took all these things and I created, you know, okay, I mean, it was truly, you know, step 1, users. And so users will have a first name and a last name, and, you know, users need to be able to change their own login. These things, back then, you didn't change your own login. You didn't reset your own password. Those things didn't exist. It was, as an admin, I need to create a user. As an admin, I need to inactivate a user. But there was no, now everybody knows forgot password. I gotta tell you, when that came out, that was new. Really. But we would do this, so it was users, and then it was cars, and you describe the car, and then some of them might have 4 seats in it, you know, all these things, but you ended up with this long document, and you turned it into the person, and you actually, and then you hammered it out. Well, you didn't get paid for that time. Back then, she's trying to tell me.
I was gonna say, you could use the word wireframes for waterfall, because that's really what we were developing the views from each of the.
Oh yeah, we created, you know, have you guys heard of Balsamiq?
Yes.
Okay, so Balsamiq, if you don't, it's BALSAMIQ. Balsamiq is a tool to help people create actual pages where you can say, and that's what we did. We created pages of what the software might look like. In addition to this, and that stuff took time. I remember when Balsamiq came out, it was huge, because back then we did them in Photoshop. And so, I mean, the world has so changed in all this time, but so waterfall design, all that time, you didn't get paid for any of it. If you were me, which could be from 0 to 60, you start being paid nothing. Honestly, you get paid nothing. You do an internship, or you do like what, I loved Holly's idea about finding something on Craigslist and doing it for free.
You went door to door, just
I-
knocked on people's door and handed out flyers.
I was a Fuller Brush man. Okay? Truly. You probably don't know what the Fuller Brush man is, do you? Okay, guys, you should look that up when you get home tonight. That's old school. I was actually before my time, but anyway, so you did all this work and you didn't get paid for it, and then you hoped, and we did this, and I'm using a driving school software because I've always wanted to build it, because the asshole that took up all my time didn't hire me. He took all my ideas and he hired another company. After I hammered it all out for him, I got paid nothing. So years ago, I thought, I'm gonna build this one day, I'm gonna put the son of a bitch out of business. I'm from the north, I apologize if anybody's offended, but we swear like sailors. So anyway, that's waterfall. Agile is totally different. Now you probably heard this many times, MVP. Does anybody not know what MVP means?
Most valuable player.
That too, Tom Brady. No, minimum viable product. You have an idea. It could be car sharing to pick up your kids from school. It could, whatever idea you have, you build a minimally viable product, which would be point 2 in my 0 to X. All right? You build the most basic product, but the way you do that is somebody says, this is my idea, and you build just enough. You don't talk about the person needs to have a first name and a last name, and they need to be able to reset their password, and I need to be able to inactivate it. I need a user. And we all know a user should have a first name, last name, but certainly an email address. And that's it. And then you build the next step, and you build the next step, and then you add the cars, and you don't have to record what kind of car it is, and you don't have to record what kind number of seats. You can worry about if you oversold and you signed on 6 students and you only had 1 car. You don't have to worry about that. You can worry about it later. So Agile development all works on a thing called story points. Stories and story points. And this is the reason why I'm telling you this is because if you're going to go into this field, you're going to hear these terms and you should know what they are. So when somebody says MVP, you don't say Tom Brady. You do say, okay? So when you're talking about Agile is broken up like this. And I wish I had, can you connect our computer so I can show them what our Agile board looks like? To AirPlay?
For
Jira.
Yeah, Jira. So I'll show you an example of exactly what we do. So there's 5 developers on our team, all working, and everybody gets their own story cards, Agile cards. Well, of course, now we are a product now. I mean, we have 500 users, and we're, X amount of revenue, and we don't think we're going to do this, and this in the future and define it like we did back then with the waterfall programming. Somebody wrote us last week and said, I need to be able to figure out if a person has redeemed coupons. And they had this idea. Well, Stacy and I were on the plane going to Chicago on Thursday afternoon, hadn't thought about it at all. And on the plane, on the way, we built the way that a person could look at redemptions of a coupon. And we had it done in an hour and a half, 2 hours max. We checked the code in, we had it tested, and it was deployed. And on Friday?
On Friday we deployed it.
Yeah. Over the weekend, we got an email saying we did 2 things that we deployed last week because somebody asked for it. We didn't have to think about it. Back then, you thought, oh, wait a minute. No. Waterfall programming. Well, Dawn, I didn't know I would need them to be able to forget to reset their password. I'm sorry, that's not in the spec. You did not deviate from spec on a waterfall design because it was a fixed cost project. You said, I'll build it for $80,000, and if you add that in, you just took 2 hours of time that you cannot get back, and and you keep doing that, and you talk about waterfall, it'll eat up your time. So Agile is you build it and you charge as you go. So if anybody ever says, this is costing too much, you say, well, you have a choice. You talked about this or you talk about this. Which one would you prefer? Or you wanted them to be able to forget password and reset their username and log in with Facebook. Do you want that? Or do you just want to use it with a first name, last name, email? So those are the things that you can do with Agile design that allows you to build a product on the fly. So what we do when these 2 companies wrote in, and can you connect? Oh, you are? All right. So can you expand it?
To just make it bigger?
Yeah. So you can see I'm the gal with the bun. That's me.
I'm the cat.
Stacy's the cat. There's Holly.
I have glasses.
All right. So, but you can see if you scroll up, here, stop here. here's one. This is a brand new sprint, so we haven't set it up, I don't know, okay, so we have points, 5 and 2. So we have allow for a coupon by specific performance dates. And we talk about this in this card. I define exactly what it means. And then as a team, we use it. Will you go to poker? I would have to do it. But we all go as a team. We read through the card. They're expected to read in advance. And then we say, how complex is it? So agile development is based on complexity, not time. They tend to be conflated, but they shouldn't be. They should be complexity and versus time. So I need to change username, that was username all one word, to user space capital name. Well, that's a 0. There's nothing complex about it. It'll take you a second to do. The next one is I want the login to be both the email and the email address or whatever. And each one, you use the Fibonacci series. You guys remember Fibonacci? Stacy, you're the mathematician. Say what Fibonacci is.
Oh, God. I believe it's the numbers adding on one after the other. So 1 and 2 make 3.
Yeah.
And then 2 and 3 make
5.
And then 3 and 5 make 8. So
Yeah,
that's the
and it goes up,
Fibonacci.
and we, in Agile, we go up to 21 points. Well, you never want to do a 21-point card because that's just big. Ordinarily, in general, you want each person in your team to complete 20 story points. That's what they're called, story points. You want them to complete 20 story points in a given sprint. This is our, show the sprint. So this is our current sprint. We're saying we're going to get this amount of work done in a given week. Go back to the other page, Stacy, so you can show it. And this is one type of software called Jira. There's tons of different agile development softwares out there. But go up, can you show the, okay, here is the sprint. Our sprint, I usually try to name them because we try to focus on one thing. This one is called customer retention. Holly's in it, she's building graphs. We know if we have graphs that tell a story that make people excited about what they sold yesterday in terms of tickets or revenue, they'll get excited and they're more likely to stay. You want people to be excited about your product. So in everything in here is about either a bug that is driving us crazy, it's frustrating people. Everything about this sprint is customer retention. And in that, I'm expecting everybody to do about 20 story points in a given 2-week period. Sprints generally run for 2 weeks. So we want them to finish about 20 points. Now tomorrow, one of our guys was out today, but tomorrow we'll all get on and we use this software. And next time if I do talk about this again, I'll give you this. But everybody votes on the complexity at the same time. Because as the owner, I could say, oh, that's a 1. And people could say, man, that just seems so much harder. And now she's expecting me to work my ass off. I'll never get my 20 points. So we use a democratic system where everybody votes and we all determine how many points this is. And then we assign the number of points. So in this case, it's a 5, and another one that we have, these were left over from last week that weren't completed, and another one is a 2. Tomorrow we'll have them all filled out so that we all do about 20 story points. And so in the end, agile development is the ability to, for one of our clients, bring up requests real quick. I'll show them a system. We operate on, this is a perfect match. Our request system is a perfect match for agile development. In our system, we have a way where our customers can ask for they make a request. We call them a frequent request. They make a request, and then people get to vote on them. So you'll see people have voted up X number of things, and when they're starred, it means a notification goes out to our customers that says, we have accepted it. So we had one come out last week that the guy asked, we had 2 of them last week, that they got a notification because after we've done it, we send out a notification. First we say, it's been accepted, we're gonna do it. which makes our customers excited. They think, oh my God, I put in that request and they're already gonna do it. And then we tell them when it's done, and then they can go look at it. So the cool thing about Agile development is I'm not doing that big document. I am building this, we are building ThunderTix as we go, truly on the fly. And all we have to do is say, what do we have to do? What do I think that we need to do, or Stacy needs to think that we need to do in order to make our software, even if they haven't thought of it. We build up all these things, we assign them to story cards, we assign the story points, and then you build a killer software. That's it. Any questions?
So, I mean, as far as like building on the go, I mean, did you ever have to back up and fix something that you did before? Because, yeah.
Plenty of times.
Okay.
Yeah. Or we do it wrong. We told somebody we did it and they say, that's not what I wanted.
Right, with communication, yeah.
So we try to get people to describe what they want well, what I need and why I need it, and the benefits behind it. A lot of people don't, but it even helps us understand. Sometimes we pick up the phone and we say, you did this, or maybe 8 people have voted on it. We might talk to everyone and say, what were you thinking when you voted on that? What was your outcome? But there's plenty of times we either do it wrong, and there's plenty of times we make errors. And
yeah, 'cause when you get have 5 ways to go and you choose one, but you know.
yeah, sometimes the cool thing about, when you've been doing this for a long time, like Stacy and I have, is sometimes you approach a problem. We tried to do this same report for the coupons a couple of years ago, and I couldn't make it work. It was slow, it was timing out, meaning that it just died before the results were returned. So I shelved it for a good 18 months. Well, then we came back and we're on the plane and I was like, oh my God, why don't we do this? And the guy wrote back and said, your process was beautiful and elegant, thank you. And it was so fucking easy. It was just so easy. Where a year and a half ago, it killed me. It crashed our server. So, but yes, we make tons of mistakes.
Can the 21-point stories not be broken down into?
Well, we do. Stacy, if you go back to that one, go ahead and click on the
Hang on.
one, number
Go back
5.
Here, like this.
Yeah.
This has 4 subtasks. So,
Yeah, that one right there.
yeah.
No, you're down in the thing, Stace. Click on that.
Which one?
This
2,
one?
3?
Yeah, in that well. So this has 4 tasks. It will assign each one of those points.
Oh, okay.
So we try to group things together. So often sometimes it's one full feature, but then one other thing that's kind of tied to it. And you always try to keep people on the same track, because then you become more efficient. And plus, then we don't forget things, so we get to test it all at the same time. So yes, we do break down. And even then, we try to take, if you had a 21-point card, you'd even try to potentially break that down into 2, 3, 4 things. Because almost every feature can be broken down into one little nugget that has value. May not have the full value you want in the end, but you do this, and that has value, and that has value, and then all together they have great value.
Right. And at the end of each sprint, do you have like a shippable product, something ready to go in the door? No,
Yes,
complete.
at the end of every one of these cards, or stories that is a multi-card thing, like you just said, broke it down, at the end of every one of those, we have code that is going into production as a finished feature, a finished bug fix, and we have differences. If Stacy goes back to that list, Stace, you can see that little red, that's a bug fix. The green tend to be stories that are multi-card things, and then the blue are usually just a generally simple task. Sometimes they're not simple, but they're a single task, and then you're done. Anybody else? All right, thank you.
Okay, I do have one last question. So do you charge by tickets then, or by hour? Like, how do you?
We have a software as a service, and
it's
so we
subscription almost?
charge anything anywhere from $39 to a couple $1,000s per month, but we don't charge any per ticket fees, any fees whatsoever, and we allow Some of our 50% of our clients charge no fee, and they consider having the software as the cost of doing business, but it's priced in a way that allows them to truly consider it a cost of doing business and not having to recoup the cost with ticket fees.
Did you always start off with that like pricing model, or did that adjust over time?
Always.
That was the first client that we had that you mentioned, the outdoor music venue. They came to us, we were already doing custom software for their website, and they came to us, they were using Ticketmaster exclusively, and they had reviewed their contract and said, we realize there's a loophole in our contract that says we're allowed to sell our own tickets through our own website as long as we charge the exact same amount in fees that Ticketmaster was charging, which back in
$6 a ticket.
2002 was $6 a ticket. And so they charged it, and they retained 100% of all those ticket fees, which is essentially what Ticketmaster is doing. They are raking in the fees for their services, and that's when we realized, when we started getting these calls from all over the country, wow, there's a real market here and a real problem, you know, with the way that you think, oh, yeah, I'll pay for a $50 ticket, and then you go to the checkout process, and that $50 ticket just became a $72 ticket because it's the fees.
Yeah.
Very cool, ladies. Good job.
Right.
And you sent 3 daughters through college on this company.
And I gotta tell you, so when I do my 0 to whatever, it will be about how you can begin your own business. This is not a bragging thing, this is truly, an effort of hard work and not being beholden to anybody else. As an older programmer that is in a male-dominated world, I've never had to worry about somebody else paying me and valuing me based on my looks, or my age or whatever, and I put 3 kids through college, I have 0 debt,
And you can hire people like me.
I was gonna say that.
And
I almost said it.
to your comments about finding companies with interns, we really haven't looked for any interns. Last summer, we had 5. Right now, we've got 2. But people have come up to us and, said, man, I wish I could have an internship, and do you know anybody? And we're like, you'll probably find something for you to do. And in most cases, we are literally, it certainly takes a lot of time to, get them up to speed, but we get some small added benefit, even if it's moving at a slower pace. And, you get the benefit of experience, so we've certainly moved that way. We never post a position for an internship, but if we come across someone that we think would be a good fit, we offer a position, and we've never done non-paid, so it would always be. A lot of companies, I think it's rare today in programming that you'd ever have an unpaid internship, so just because you're using the word
That's
intern
good news.
doesn't mean you should
Yeah,
be
you
unpaid.
should never work somewhere that won't pay you. Internships in programming, you should at least make $20 an hour, at least.
And I disagree.
Yeah, not if you're a college kid.
If you're a college kid and you can, most college jobs you're getting paid, $7, $8, $9, $10 an hour, you're folding shirts in retail, you're a wait staff person. Virtually everybody that we have met has asked for 8 to 10, and we've often paid 10, but I spent 45 minutes writing one of the cards we could have shown you. 45 minutes, I had to define what the code was doing, what it was attempting to doing, and the thing is when he's finished, he's gonna have learned. He's worked with us last summer and again, and he will find a job making $65,000 plus.
But it does take a lot more of our time
Yeah.
to define those cards for interns, to make sure that they don't get flustered, that they don't feel overwhelmed, because you want it to be a good experience for them too. But you just can't pay as much as a company.
From a small business standpoint, maybe from a large company, I'm sure that they would
If
pay
you're
20.
a computer science intern,
Yeah.
usually will
You
make
should.
around 20.
Yes, because then your chops are there, but this kid is a math major, we have another girl that's in her second
Advertising.
year, yeah. They wanted to learn everything from SEO to jQuery, but it takes a ton of my time, or
Yeah.
Stacy's time. And there's
If
a
you're
cost to
taking
it.
someone off the street,
Yeah.
that's different.
we're doing it for them, because we do believe, one of them is a girl, and one of them is a friend's son. And so, and we do it sometimes when we, when we wanna help them, so it's not for our benefit. Although it's not to say we don't get a benefit, but the cost is high.
You guys are very generous.
Thank you, Holly. And we did bring the food.
And I would say there's a lot of value in the experience, and paid or unpaid for an internship.
Right.
Doing an internship at a tech company or getting your foot in the door with an internship, I would say is a lot more valuable than folding shirts for a summer, if that's what your other option is. So even if it's unpaid, think of the experience that you're getting and the value from that, not just the money.
Especially in today's market. I mean, there's just so many opportunities. I mean, there's so many opportunities folding shirts too, but what are you gonna do after that? But when you take your skill level up a notch with each internship or each month or year, you raise your value.
Well, we're done with all the talks for tonight. There's still wine and food, and if you all want to mingle, we have the space for about another 20 minutes if you want to ask 0 to 1 questions.
Yes. I definitely do.
Anybody wants to ask me any questions on anything, you can. I know lots of stuff other than how to do programming.
Yeah.
That was in June I started with Haskell.
All right, and then sit on the outside and talk to Stacy.
The Lambda for like 5 months. That's what the guy would teach me.
So, we're done?
Cool, I understood.
Sit and mingle.
Yeah, I think it's the first thing that turned out.
And we all had no one.
Yes, exactly. It took me a while to catch that.
Oh, Jira?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went here, sometimes. And I was like, why did you tell me not to? It took forever to get to there. So I started with that.
That's where I got
Oh, you have selenium, huh?
Stateless, everything always retains its original state, it's beautiful. So that was something that I thought was cool, I was like weird. They're never gonna change that. Wow. It's so much
because I don't have any experience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's nice.
all my background is either accounting, administration. I don't want to start because
What's it called?
I work in startups.
Okay.
So I used to know everything. I knew how the startup works. Because there was one person or two persons starts and everything. I
That's
see, but so things I wasn't the
Yeah, and I have been in Mongolia. But if you these things, this is me demonstrating my jQuery, CSS, having websites that I'm using, that he even if it's front and move, shows their and they can go there, she must be pretty good on this page on your site. You know, you have a page dedicated to each thing, you click on your jQuery tab, you've got some cool interactive.
I love that, that's why we did.
Something that really does show skills, not just saying, I know jQuery. I know this. That's really funny. That's what Phil's website demonstrates skills. So, I love to find that you've already, I think you'll know my Halloween
I think this theoretical method, and I try to win.
I'm not seeing it. That's not my goal. I just want to get in. I know the money will come. That's not where I will be. I just want to go where I
Looks like it's, well.
Yeah, I'm
right now.
installing it where it's supposed to.
So we're in the middle of reading her. We just
First step, right? I'm very late.
We have another thing in California that just started.
Stuck in your bus.
I think red dot. I'll tell you, if you thought this was heavy, it's but, you know what? No. This is gonna talk about It's the worst. Like tonight, do you know you'll get to watch Big Six. I go there and I'm like, oh my god, it is funny, but if you want to learn.
Yeah, I know.
About a bunch of different we speak intelligence. Somebody says, have you ever heard of an MVP? Definitely, but if you're not around, you're not going. You don't get that good. So that's great.
Just read the headline. Somebody else is
I will say, the Austin on Rails community is so well comment. It's a very welcoming community. But if you go with the self-confidence that, I know this is gonna be hard. I know I'm not gonna. I don't know what's going on. I don't expect to know what's going on. I don't expect to understand it when I know it's very funny, so I'm not continuing to learn. We were so jealous of him. We would love to have his expertise, but he was willing to see me in program, so she was awesome. She said,
And so I our lives for going to the beach. We're under.
It's bigger. Oh, it's not quite like this. It's not like this. To know each other, we really have to go up and be confident and know that it's they have these all new programming teams, and sometimes they're like, just like this heavy testosterone filled team. And so there are so you may not have to, have all the experience. So you can start your website, start, the best thing not an app as in when I say I'm not doing website, that's an app. That's a hard thing. Not necessarily.
You know what I mean, like.
Last Thursday, I don't know what program.
Like,
Take
my
that
birthday
down.
was
Our spelling.
Last one I went to say,
Like,
if I were going to do something, and I was very nervous, because I know how long my kids have.
But
You
it's
start
okay.
thinking, you start
They
working
will
on your
figure it
website, you've got kids,
out.
you're talking about what's it considered.
Right,
a
better
fake
not
job.
to
know, I have to think about
Because they
it.
want new developers to look at the old.
I was gonna ask you what's
Basic.
I actually did
How you can see are all the things that each of you can do. Start to get hardcore working, right? Yeah, we meet for, you can say, I'm working on my own street. Between the junior high and high school.
So actually, I just one. And then I took a year ET now. It's funny, I was when I would read about it, I'm like,
Model and control. Like my controller will have a controller. In the controller, there's an action edit button. So I have users need to be edited. Yeah, I know. Those are the starting to feel like, I'm starting to like, from the houses or just methods that, they do like, so I make sure that it's all kind of like that.